There are a lot of legendary creatures in Magic, and in every set, they print a lot more. Because of that, the options Commander players have to choose from is immeasurable. Well, I mean, you could measure it. You just count every legendary creature, partner combo, background combo, friends forever combo, Doctor's Companion combo, the other random things that can be your commanders. You have a lot, like many options, too many arguably. And sometimes it can be difficult to narrow all of those options to one commander for your deck. So I wanted to give you some ideas and suggestions on how you can help narrow down that search for yourself. Before I get into that though, I do want to say there is no wrong reason to choose a commander. If you simply like a card, that is good enough. So if you cracked a piss-covered frog god from Aether Drift, and you want it to be your commander, that is totally fine. Ultimately, I don't know you, and I'm just a funny voice in your computer. So all I can comment on is gameplay and strategy. If you just like the card, go for it. And if this video inspires you to make a new commander deck, consider buying cards from Cool Stuff Inc. If you use code TTM at checkout, it gives you a discount and supports me. Thanks to Cool Stuff Inc. for sponsoring the video. About a year ago, I made a video comparing top-down design to bottom-up design for your commander decks. In this video, I'm going to mention those concepts again. It's not required viewing for this video, so really quickly, top-down is when you pick a commander and you build the deck around that card. Bottom-up is where you build a deck idea and find a commander for it. Now, top-down is much simpler. Oftentimes, players will put their commanders on a pedestal and set it up as the centerpiece of their deck. I'll use Brago or Miku as an example. If you fill your deck with Enter the Battlefield effects and play your commander, then thwack an opponent, you flicker all the ETBs and get a ton of value. This is a really common type of deck. You build up your board such that your commander creates a massive amount of value. Your deck needs to have all of the support pieces in play for your commander to function, and then when your commander functions, you do something big. The most extreme example of this would probably be Phage the Untouchable, since without your support pieces, you literally lose the game and cannot use the commander. And using the commander does something huge. It causes someone to lose instantly. Using your commander as the centerpiece of your deck is probably the most popular way to build a commander deck because it seems really fun on paper. You just need to set up your commander with these things and you do something massive. Or you play your commander and then these specific cards become much better. But I think this is one of the less good ways to build a commander deck. Part of the problem is if your whole deck revolves around one commander, it becomes the most powerful card in your deck. And it's like a big weak spot on the back of a boss in a video game. Your opponents know that removing it is going to be the biggest hit to your deck since it's the most powerful card you have, especially if your commander is the type that wins the moment you untap with it, in which case your opponents have no choice but to spend their removal on your commander, otherwise they lose. So if you make your commander the strongest thing in your deck, you're going to end up with two types of games. Either nobody has removal and you explode all over the table and win, or your commander gets nuked 5 times and you don't play Magic the Gathering. To me, both of these outcomes are not ideal. If you insist on playing your commander as the centerpiece of the deck, here is some advice. Overload on protection. Cheap ways to save your commander from removal, and if you are in a blue heavy meta, things that stop counterspells like Uba Mask or Defense Grid can be great. But if you had a commander in mind that you wanted to make the centerpiece of your deck, you probably didn't need to click on this video since you already know what you're doing with it. It's much more difficult to have a deck and then come up with a commander that fits with it. So I want to focus more on that. But first, a word from this video's sponsor. Back when I lived in San Diego, I lived in a 100-year-old hotel. If you've been there, you might actually know the building I'm talking about. It's an old historic building that's been renovated to be apartments, but there's still hotel rooms. And for years, I didn't even have a kitchen. So to avoid overpriced takeout, I used Factor, which is why I'm happy to say this video is sponsored by a brand I enjoy using. And even now that I live in a normal apartment with an actual kitchen, Factor is still nice for the sheer convenience. When I'm crunching to get a video out on time, like this one, throwing one of these in the microwave for a quick, fresh, never frozen lunch saves me a lot of time. Plus, they got like a million options to choose from. Hey buddy, your food is over here. Go that way. So if you're interested in getting some ready meals mailed to your door, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50TTM to get 50% off, plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50TTM at factor75.com to get 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Salubrious Snail talks about a type of commander called a counterweight commander. Basically, it is a legendary creature chosen to shore up the weakness of a deck or strategy rather than enhance one. One example he gives is Liesa at the helm of a Hate Bears deck, with the idea that Hate Bears slow down the pace of the game and don't do that much damage. So the commander is a reliable beater that helps with that weakness. And I thought about this concept a lot. A commander that fixes the weakness of a list is pretty interesting, and I wondered if any of my decks do this. And the answer is yes and no. My Heliod deck is definitely a counterweight deck. My goal was to build draw-go control in mono white. Now the problem is, traditionally in draw-go control, the idea is you hold up all of your mana, cast your removal if you need it, and if you don't, you would play some instant speed way to develop your board or instant speed way to draw cards to keep up with the rest of the game. The problem is, in mono white compared to a blue control shell, is you don't have the instant speed card advantage that you normally would have access to. So my commander does that for me. Being able to dump my mana into my commander and make dudes is pretty useful. It means I didn't waste a whole turn if I just held up my interaction. And in tandem with other cards in the deck, this can also become a powerful finisher. Another thing draw-go control often lacks. Heliod fixes all of the weaknesses in the deck. An indestructible beater, able to make blockers early game, and lets me advance my board while holding up interaction. But most of my other decks don't do this. So it got me thinking about why I selected these commanders to lead my deck. Going back to the counterweight commander idea, this is something you could really only have by building bottom up. You have your deck's strategy laid out in front of you. In the Hate Bears example, you play your cheap Hate Bears to slow down the game. Once you have delayed your opponent's strategy, you then play your finisher to close out the game. The finisher being in the command zone. That fills a specific role in the deck. I think you can do the same for any strategy and have your commander lock in a specific role in the deck. I'll use my Taurnos deck as an example. You see, Salvaging Station is one of my favorite cards of all time. It reanimates baubles, and as you might be able to tell from my Trinket Mage themed YouTube channel, I like silly little artifacts. So I knew I wanted a deck that uses this card. And my goal for the mid-game of a Salvaging Station deck is to find it, play it, copy it, make many Salvaging Stations, and loop baubles around for value. And then whatever my win con is. And ultimately, I went with Taurnos because he fills that third spot. He is essentially another Salvaging Station. Not quite, but he does let me double up on the effects of baubles, lets me activate the station an additional time by just copying its trigger. Because of this, my deck always has access to one quote-unquote clone effect. One piece of the puzzle for my mid-game has been solved by my commander. Here's another example, my old Mardu Goad list, which I have since taken apart, but I think it is an apt example here. This deck had two main themes. One, it's a Goad deck. I want to force my opponent's creatures to attack my opponents. Two, I wanted to utilize some power 2 or less matters cards and get value from that. While my opponent's creatures were goaded, I was able to chip in at them slowly over time to get more and more triggers and incremental advantage throughout the game. So I selected two commanders that enhance both of these strategies. One is Tymna. She fits the slot of a power 2 or less thing that triggers off of combat damage. I now have access to that every single game. And Jessica operated as a pseudo-goad card. Using political deals, I was often able to get one player to swing at someone else, because I would offer tripling the damage of their creature, and a lot of times, people loved the sound of dealing triple damage. Jessica also could work as a finisher for the deck, because once a creature is goaded, tripling the damage from it can make that a lethal threat. When I break down my deck into all of these steps, goad my opponent's stuff, play low power creatures that get triggers from attacking, and then finishing my opponents off by having them swing into each other, my commanders fulfill some of these roles, giving my deck a sense of cohesion and consistency. even with a relatively jank, disjointed set of sub-themes. So if you want to find the perfect commander for your deck, what I would recommend is really picking apart what your deck's game plan really is. Step by step, what do you want to be doing in the early, mid, and late game? Where do you want to be? And if you can break that up into multiple steps, find a commander that fulfills one of those roles. And in doing so, you then don't need as many of that card in the 99. I don't really need many token generating mana outlets in my Heliod deck, because I have an indestructible one in the command zone, which frees up more slots in the 99 because not only does Heliod fulfill that role, he fulfills it consistently. If you're struggling to come up with what the mid-game strategy for your deck is, I would recommend, at the very least, trying to come up with the end-game strategy. This is often a lot easier to do. If you want to win with a combo, go wide, go tall, anything like that, you can then work backwards to what your mid-game might be. If you really like the idea of making a wide board of dudes and amplifying their power to attack your opponents, that can help you pin down what you want to be doing on turns 4, 5, 6. Perhaps it is building up a board of Saprolings. Perhaps it's putting counters on the Saprolings, and maybe it's protecting the Saprolings from a board wipe to set up for the finisher itself. And then from there, you can find a legendary creature that fulfills any of those one roles, and then you now have access to that tool for your mid-game. Using a commander that fulfills a specific role in the deck and locks down that step of your game plan will add to the consistency and cohesion of your deck. And I know it's not as flashy or explosive as a centerpiece commander such that when you play it, you basically win the game. But I think that having a deck that functions well consistently and is able to hit all of the steps you want it to more often than not will lead to more fun gameplay experiences for you. I find it more fun to step-by-step execute a game plan rather than build up towards one big obvious I win the game card that your opponents can then focus down. And from there, you'll probably just lose without having done your thing. But of course, this is just my opinion and how I really think I've been focusing on picking commanders. But if you have any different suggestions on how to select a commander, let me know in the comments below. And if this helped you pick a commander, let me know as well. I would love to hear what specific commander you found to fulfill a role in your deck's mid-game plan. Thank you so very much for watching. Thank you to all of my patrons who support me and make these videos possible. If you want to join the Patreon and check out the perks, link is in the description below.